Okay. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. These are our live Wednesdays. We will be going live every Wednesday, October 7th today, October 14th, and October 28th at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Each Wednesday, we have our basically 101, so there'll be domestic violence and narcissist abuse 101, and we will be discussing different topics each Wednesday. So this is, again, from the Narcissistic Domestic Violence Healing and Support page, and NDV Healing and Support Incorporated, again, will be going live every Wednesday, the 7th, 14th, and 28th to discuss Domestic Violence 101 and Narcissist Abuse 101 and teaching topics. So today I have I am Theresa Simon, the Executive Director and Founder of NDV Healing and Support Incorporated. And I have these two lovely ladies with me, Yolanda Oliver, who is our board member, and she is also the founder of Live Fearless. And I also have Nicole Davis with us, our other lovely board member on NDV Healing and Support Incorporated. So these two beautiful women will be joining me to discuss the Domestic Violence 101 teaching topics on the live Wednesdays. So tonight's topic, we will be discussing a few things. We'll be just going over domestic violence. We will be going over the types of domestic violence, some red flags that you can watch out for, and basically prevention. So for domestic violence, and before we just get into that, I want to give the audience a little bit of a definition of domestic violence. So domestic violence is the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, and other abusive behavior as a part of a systemic pattern of power and control, perpetrated by one intimate partner against the other. It can include physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, emotional abuse, and financial abuse. The frequency and severity of domestic violence can vary dramatically with individual relationships. However, the one consistent component of domestic violence is the partner's consistent efforts to maintain power and control over the other. And as it was talking about that definition, so that does bring us right to the types of domestic violence. There's obviously the physical abuse, which most people are aware of, the physical abuse. But then there is also emotional abuse is domestic violence, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse. And also with narcissism, narcissistic abuse is domestic violence. So those are some things that people may or may not have known. And okay, so Yolanda, did you want to also discuss some things too about domestic violence as well, or a little bit about the type?
Yes, I did want to go and just share about teen dating violence, which is something that we truly need to be aware of, especially as parents. Stalking is also a form of abuse or harassment, stalking and harassment. Human trafficking is another form of domestic violence, as well as digital abuse. So domestic violence ranges in so many different ways, and often people don't realize that they are dealing with abuse because some things haven't been labeled, or the education is not out there, or people don't know it is, so they don't know to research that they are dealing with a situation of abuse.
Definitely. And I think that happens especially with the emotional abuse, and also sometimes with financial abuse. People aren't aware that that's abuse. And even sometimes with the sexual abuse, sometimes people are in a committed relationship or married or even unmarried, but you're living together and that's your boyfriend. And they think that, oh, well, that means that I have to have sex with this person. You can say no at any time, whether you are married in a committed relationship or not. You do not have to have sex with someone. So
exactly. You always have the right to say no, and you can exercise that right at any time. And if you don't feel that you're safe to do that and communicating with your partner that you like your no is a no, then you should be concerned, because you should be comfortable to share what you feel with your partner. So
absolutely. And you just hit the nail on the head. You should be comfortable to share what you feel with your partner. Oftentimes in domestic violence, that's what the biggest issue is, that you're walking on eggshells and you do not feel comfortable not only sharing anything, you don't even feel comfortable in your own skin doing what your normal day-to-day activities. You don't know what is going to upset them or set them off. So you're in your home and you're like, okay, well, should I do this? I don't know if I'm doing this right, or because you don't know what is going to be that little thing that sets them off.
the triggers.
Exactly.
And for some of you who might not know, or you might have experienced it, that, you know, multiple forms of domestic violence can happen all at the same time. So from my experience, I experienced physical abuse on top of psychological abuse and financial abuse. But what happened was I ended up leaving after my second physically abusive relationship. I said, I'm never going to let anybody hit me again, ever, 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 not realizing that I've been psychologically abused, or you can call it emotional or verbal abuse. All of that falls under psychological abuse, all not realizing that I was being abused in those ways. And then I just walked into relationships where they may have not hit me, but they talked down to me, they cursed me out, they called me all kinds of names, they played all kinds of mind games, played with my money, all types of things. So like they can all happen in layers. So it's important to know that they can happen interchangeably at the same time or independently. So that's important to know.
Yes. And I think that's very good that you touched on that, because they can happen independently or they can happen together, but all of those encompass domestic violence: the emotional, physical, psychological, sexual, and financial. And a lot of times people, they get very confused by what they're experiencing. They're not sure if it's domestic violence. And it's so important that that's why we're doing this, so that people understand that you do not have to stay. And even if, like you said, you left that physically abusive relationship, then you went to an emotionally abusive relationship, a lot of times people aren't aware that you're still you left one abusive relationship to another. And a lot of times that happens because you haven't taken the time to heal, to do the work, to go to therapy and go to coaching. And I can speak from experience because that was what happened with myself. The first abusive relationship I got into, once I left that relationship, it was 10 years before I was in another abusive relationship. And I thought, well, 10 years has passed, I'm fine, I'm healed, so to speak. And I was not. I hadn't went to counseling. I hadn't went to therapy. I didn't, do the work. And I met someone and, he was love bombing me and sweeping me off my feet. And I thought, oh, this is great. And nope, it was another abusive relationship. So yes, you could be like, because I always say to people, take time before you get into another relationship. And, I took plenty of time because even though there was like another relationship in between there, I still had 10 years out of that abusive relationship. So as far as I was concerned, I took the time, but I didn't do the work.
Right.
I didn't go to counseling. I didn't go to any therapy at that point. After the second abusive relationship, I did go to therapy, and there was so much that I learned. And, if I had maybe went that after that first time around, then I could have done the work and I could have healed, but I didn't. So it's so important that people understand before you get into that next relationship, it's okay to take the time to be single and, and heal and do the work and go get therapy and go get counseling. It is definitely okay to take the time. The world is not going to stop. You will be fine, but with taking the time. And it will serve you so much better because then you can get into a healthier relationship, hopefully.
I think also what a lot of people don't understand is that these abusers seek us out. There's something within us and they see that insecurity and they play on it. And that's how they get into our minds. And we think that this person understands us, you know, better than anyone else, and we get so bonded and connected with them when they're actually using that. So that's why it's important for that healing aspect, because if you can recognize what that imperfection is within yourself mentally and get help for it, then you become a less desirable target.
So true. Because a lot of abuse victims are very, very empathetic, people pleasers. We want to help everyone. We want to save everyone. And we're genuinely nice people, and we want to help and save everyone. And the abusers know that, and they know who to look for. And then they meet you, and they start love bombing you, and they start opening up to you so that you can tell them information about yourself, so then they can later use that against you. And not all abusers are narcissists, but a lot of them are. And so they start learning, okay, I now have all this information about her, and now when the time is right, I'm going to use that information.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's another huge reason why healing is so important.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Healing is important for you to learn exactly what abuse looks like, learn what communication, like a healthy relationship looks like, but more importantly, learn how to love you. Because once you love yourself wholly, your expectations of your partner you will have raised your expectations for what you expect from anyone else and also for yourself. So that is a critical component to really healing, is taking that time to really love on yourself. And once you're able to do that and then learn what abuse is, because I learned afterwards and I was like, wow, all these things were happening. I didn't even realize that this was abuse. But if I had that information, or if I sought out the information earlier, I could have avoided some of the other relationships that I went into. So like Theresa, I had gaps of years where I wasn't in relationships, but it was more like avoidance. Like I just didn't want to be bothered. I just didn't want to be hurt anymore. I didn't want to feel like crap anymore. So I just said, you know what, let me just take a step back. Let me concentrate on my son and work really, really hard. And I feel like it was more avoidance than dealing with the inner parts of me that allowed this to happen to me. Like that I would allow someone to constantly treat me poorly. That I would keep attracting that same or that individual who does not value me as a person, who is an abuser. So the important piece to healing, like I shout it from the rooftop to take the time, invest in yourself, get counseling, therapy, whatever it is you need, so that you can become whole and healthy. And then at that point, then entertain relationships again. I always feel like you need to be whole first before you can really engage in a relationship and come in a healthy way, because you don't want to bring all of your baggage into a relationship as well. So you need to be able to be whole, know what your own triggers are, what you're dealing with, so that you can truly set boundaries, communicate boundaries, and be able to have a mutual respect with your partner.
Yes, and you hit the nail on the head, mutual respect. Because in healthy relationships, there is a mutual respect, and there is the ability to talk and discuss things when you have a conflict. There's the ability to share things. In an abusive relationship, you can't do those things. So it is so important to be whole and healthy, but part of being whole and healthy is doing that work. Like you said, you have to get to that point where okay, why am I attracting this type of relationship? And a lot of times when you go into therapy, you find out that reason. It's different for every individual, because, we're individuals. For myself, I did not have a good relationship with my dad. And that may be the case for some people, but it's not always the case. I've met survivors that have, that were in 2-parent households, right, and they had, pretty decent relationships with their parents. So it depends on each person. But, I didn't have a great relationship with my dad, and that contributed to a lot of it.
Right. And every individual is different, because you can't say it's someone who comes from a broken home, someone who comes from, because domestic violence impacts anybody and everybody. Everyone can be a victim of abuse. So we don't want to limit it. We need to dispel the myth that it only happens in certain classes, certain educations, the socioeconomic stigma. Domestic violence can happen to anyone and everyone. So we just need to make sure we lay that foundation first so that people understand that you can be a victim of abuse if you're not aware. So be aware, and that's what we're here for, so we can help educate. So you know the signs, be aware, know what it is. So if you see it, start running fast and don't turn back. Don't turn back. Run. Run, Forrest, run.
Absolutely, because you're right. And that's the other thing that I'm so glad that you touched on, because yes, domestic violence happens to all walks of life, no matter what your class, no matter what your race, no matter how old you are. It does not discriminate. No matter your profession, there's doctors, lawyers, it happens across the board to everyone. So it's important to get away from that way of thinking that it only happens to certain people, because domestic violence affects everyone across the board. And another thing too that I wanted to touch on was some of the red flags. Mm-hmm. So because a lot of times people, not only, we did touch on the types of domestic violence, so now people understand that there are several aspects of it. But a lot of times people don't know what those red flags are, like what it is that they should be looking out for, so that they can say, hey, I need to go in the other direction. I don't need to continue this relationship.
Right.
So Nikki, what would you think would be some of the red flags? Nikki, Yolanda, you guys can go ahead and chime in.
Controlling behavior, jealousy, someone who is struggling to communicate what it is they're feeling. I always feel like communication is huge in relationships, and where someone struggles with communicating, expressing what they feel openly with you, that's a concern. My two that I always want to warn people of is the two I's. In a relationship, you should be integrating your lives together. If someone's trying to isolate you from your family, your friends, your network of people, that's a concern. Because when you're building a relationship, your lives should start to integrate. You should be able to communicate and deal with his people, depending on what the relationship is, friends, family. And the same should be for you. If someone's pulling you away from your family, your friends, they don't want you to communicate and talk to your friends and family, that is your number one alert. I always say the I and the I. If you integration, not isolation. If you're in a relationship and you're feeling like you're starting to be isolated and pulled away from your family and your, what I call it, your tribe, you need to be concerned, because anyone who truly loves you wants you to be whole and healthy and be able to enjoy those relationships and that time out and the things that you do, whether it's by yourself for your own self-care or with your family and friends. No one should be jealous of that time. So that's always a good warning sign. Those are just a few. Nikki, you can jump in.
Go ahead.
I was going to say a huge one for me was he diminished what it was that he was doing. So when we would get in the arguments and I would get choked or get hit, he'd be like, well, you're not walking around here, all bloody, or, trying to make it seem like it wasn't what it really was, and trying to convince me. So if you have a strong feeling of what is going on is not right, and they're telling you no, if it was abuse, you would be doing this, or this, it would be like this, it would be, like we just spoke about, there's different levels to it. Abuse is abuse, and not even all domestic violence is physical. So to try and downplay the severity of the abuse, that's a huge red flag, or that was a huge one for me. He would constantly say that what he was doing to me wasn't as bad as what it should have been. So
minimizing it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Blaming you, that's another one. Blaming you for what they did. Like, my behavior is your fault. If you
Yes.
didn't say that, I wouldn't have hit you. If you didn't say that, I wouldn't have acted like that. If you
I've
didn't
never
say that, I wouldn't have, I wouldn't have told you couldn't go in. It's always the blame game back and forth. There's never any accountability. They're always placing blame on you.
Yes. And one thing that I wanted to jump in and say, even in normal relationships, there are communication issues that are what, for societal standards would be considered normal, and they have normal problems. So when you have the complexity of domestic violence on top of just normal behavioral issues, it's like you got to think that this stresses out the regular person when they have normal relationship issues. So even if you're in a situation where you suspected could be abuse or you're not comfortable, it's important to be like, maybe we need to get get like a relationship, something, and start that process regardless, because it's not going to get better. It's just going to become worse and worse until it explodes.
I agree. I agree. Another sign I could think of is if some verbal abuse, I think in society, we're so easy to use all types of words and talk to people in all types of way and accept it. But verbal abuse, if someone's battering you with words, that's abuse. So if I'm calling you all types of names and it's not the name that your mama and your daddy gave you, that's a form of abuse. And I feel like the society normalizes just verbal abuse. I really do believe we do. You see it all over the television, everywhere, social media, but it is abuse. So it's the level that you accept or you tolerate. But verbally abusing you, those are abuse. If somebody's already starting to call you out your name, that's already a sign that there's a concern. That's a red flag for me.
And what that actually is it's a tactic, because it's meant to break you down mentally so that they can build you up with whatever compliments, Theresa was saying, love bomb you. So then they can love bomb you and say, see, I make you feel good, after they're the ones that just made you feel bad though. And that's a tactic in brainwashing you or conditioning you to be submissive to them. And a lot of people don't understand that, and it's important to.
Yeah.
And we are going to get into love bombing at our next live Wednesday. We'll talk about love bombing and trauma bonding. But because we are just getting a little bit into that, for those of you that are listening, love bombing is when they attempt to influence a person by demonstrating so much attention and affection. It can be used in different ways and for either positive or negative purposes. It's basically a part of a cycle of abuse. And like she said, it's where they're trying to use that to control you. So they'll love bomb you, and that's part of the, on the narcissistic wheel, that's part of the idealization phase. And then they'll get to the devaluation phase, and then the discard phase. In order to build that trauma bond, they have to love bomb you so that you are bonded to them and you feel that connection to them. So that's what they do, is they start to love bomb you in the beginning. And for a lot of people, myself included, I didn't know that I was being love bombed. I just thought that this person is giving me so much attention and affection, but that's what it is.
A couple of others, I guess, that we can talk about is having unrealistic expectations of you.
Yes.
And if you don't meet those expectations, then all hell breaks loose. So that's, another thing. Unrealistic expectations is dependent on you, the person, but sometimes you have an abuser where they expect you to do everything. And after you've done everything, it's still not good enough. So you could have exceeded the expectation and it still not be good enough. But that's a clear sign of someone who they set an expectation. And I'll give an example from me, where I had an ex where he had me on an expectation of where he met me when I was 20 years old. Now I'm 34 years old. I'm not 24 anymore. So there are certain things that I used to do at 20 that I don't do at 34. And that used to be a huge disappointment to him. So everything that I did wrong, I looked different from 20 to 34. That was already a problem. So that was always going to be an issue and things like that. But just be mindful if they're setting a bar that's so high that you could never even meet the expectation. And then when you try your hardest and it's still not good enough, that should be something that should concern you, because you should always feel valued in a relationship. If you're starting to feel devalued, that's a warning sign, something that should be of concern to you.
Yes, definitely.
And I agree with that, because, and that was one thing in my previous relationship, like it was my fault that he could not find a job. And and it was like, well, it's because of you. It's because of you. And something about being with you, and he was saying that to me, like it was because of being with me, he could not be successful in his life the way that he wanted to be. Wow. Not because he got found with handguns and couldn't keep his hands to himself and got caught with a bunch of marijuana. Not because of any of that.
Because that would be accountability if it was him, right? If he owned that, right?
Exactly.
No, it was exactly. Oh yeah. Wow.
And I would apply for all these jobs for him, and they would run a background, or he'd piss dirty at the drug test, which I guess it was my fault that he was smoking weed and piss dirty for the piss test. Like and I'm just like, how, you know, and like you said, it's like you could exceed the expectations. I built his resume. I was getting him these job interviews and these offers, but he was not following through on his end, and somehow it became my fault, and it was my wrongdoing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to talk about too, like I said, we're talking about this in our next live, but just so the people understand, like, so what I was saying about the love bombing, they'll shower you with that affection and that attention so that they can create the trauma bond. And then once they create that trauma bond, so the trauma bond, for those of you listening and they may not know what that trauma bond is, it's a type of toxic bond that occurs between the abuser and the victim, and it's when the abuser alternates between creating the highs and the lows within the relationship and offers reward or punishment as they deem fit. So that high and that low is like they'll be love bombing you and showering you with attention and affection, and then they'll go, that's the idealization phase, and then they'll go to devaluing you and being abusive. So that they'll create the highs and lows between the relationship and offer reward or punishment as they deem fit. And that this trains the victim and makes the victim, that happiness is solely dependent on how well they can please the abuser. And what happens is it creates that traumatic bond, and the trauma bond can form very quickly. And once it's formed, that trauma bond can outlive the relationship. So meaning you can be in that relationship for 2 years, but that trauma bond can last 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And it leaves the victim craving comfort for the very person who hurt them. So the trauma bond is an addiction, just like alcohol is addiction, and being addicted to heroin or other substance abuse is an addiction. The trauma bond is an addiction. And just like alcoholics and heroin users or other drug users, they have to go through withdrawal, and they have to go through working on themselves to make sure that they maintain sobriety. Victims have to do the same thing. They go through withdrawal when they go no contact, and then they still have to work towards maintaining it's sobriety in a sense, because it's not speaking to that abuser, going no contact, which can be very, very difficult. So when people always pose the question, and this is a question that comes up countless domestic violence arenas, why do victims go back? Why do victims go back? That is why, largely in part. It may not be always, there's so many other factors as well, but that is a huge factor, is the trauma bond. Obviously financial can be another huge factor as well, but the trauma bond is a bond that is extremely difficult to break unless you are going completely no contact. And in some cases there are children, so no contact may be difficult. So, that's why we suggest maybe doing third party visitation, so that way the third party, so then you still don't have to communicate, or at the very minimum, going gray rock, which is no emotional responses. You speak only about the kids. It is yes and no, get off the phone, you're done. Because the more contact you have with the abuser, the more you are reinforcing that traumatic bond, unfortunately.
I also think, especially when you have a child with your abuser, because if you have a real charismatic narcissist like I do as an ex, they typically try to use the court to play their game, to make you play their game. And even reaching out to your local domestic violence shelter or whatever advocacy program you may have in order to figure out what resources, like with me, because they helped me flee my abuser in 2015. So when he filed for custody in 2018 and was like, well, you know, I should know where my son lives and I should be able to go to her house because sorry about that. I had a friend who was helping me do the exchanges, and then he was using the court to say, well, I should be able to go to her house. Well, when I moved, I went back to the shelter that helped me get away from him, and I used the confidentiality program where my address is now private, and no court order can compel me to divulge my address. And I did that because I was like, listen, he came through my window and beat the crap out of me. I'm not saying that he's going to do it today, but what I'm saying is I have boundaries. And this is a boundary for me. I don't want him around my house. I don't want him coming to my house. And it's important as a domestic violence survivor for me to be able to set these boundaries and they be respected. That's the purpose. And also,
that's good though that they allowed that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But also, who's to say when he's gonna go off you'd be angry about something with my child and maybe come through my window?
Right.
I'm not, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but it could. He's done it before. There's a history of it, and that should be respected. And that's why my boundaries should be respected. So even if you have to use outside sources to help you set those boundaries for you to be able to effectively, you know, not communicate with them, you know, or keep them away from you, that's good to do too.
Yes, and I think that's really good that you touched on two important things. First of all, I think it's awesome that there's a program that you can actually have your address be confidential. I think that's amazing because not everywhere do they have that program, and that would be awesome if that was implemented everywhere because that's amazing. But the other thing you did touch on.
Sorry, Theresa, just
go ahead.
Back to that, because once Nikki had shared that on one of our support group sessions, I actually send it out to our clients, and I think 4 or 5 of them actually used it because it's different by state, but it actually works. So I thank you for sharing that information because as soon as she said that, I looked it up. I was like, let me get this to them because they might not know. So like,
that's
let me
amazing.
give out the information now. Set everybody up for success. True.
That's awesome.
It is. That's awesome. And I love that we have this network to help people. But that is amazing. I'm glad that we were able to get that information out to people because, yeah, that's something that really needs to be utilized. The other thing that I like that you touched on is you said use outside resources to help you set those boundaries. And that is so important because when you are stuck in that trauma bond, and of course I'm speaking from experience, you don't, sometimes it is like with alcohol, with alcoholics, they have, for example, they have AA meetings, you know, that they go to that try to help them stay on that path to sobriety. Well, domestic violence victims need support so that they can stay on that path to being no contact with that abuser and breaking that trauma bond. And that happens by also, like you said, setting boundaries. And one of those things that we do here at NDV Healing and Support is that we have a mentorship and coaching program. So if you want someone to have that one-on-one support with you, that person that's going to walk you through this process, because you're saying, you know what, I'm really feeling trauma bond tonight. I really feel like I want to call him or I want to go back to him. You have a person there that you can talk to and walk you through that process. And it's so important to have that support. And so some people, you know, they do get the one-on-one support from us from the mentoring in the coaching program. And then others, they come to our virtual empowerment sessions, which is a group session that we meet bi-weekly on Saturdays, and it's virtual via Zoom. So that means people can join us nationally and internationally, which people have joined us from throughout the United States and through other countries. And we also have mental health professionals with special guests and different topics each time. So it's an educational piece, but it also is a piece where survivors can get the support and the help that they need, and the support that they need so that they can continue to set those boundaries and continue to stay in no contact with their abuser and not go back. And we do that in partnership with Live Fearless Incorporated with Yolanda. So it is important that you have that support, and I just want survivors out there to understand that there is support out there if you need it, if you're really feeling like, because the trauma bond, like alcoholism and drug abuse, it's something that you have to work at every day. So you will have days that are difficult where you feel that you are having a bad day with the trauma bond, and you want to call the abuser, you want to talk to the abuser, you want to see the abuser. And it's good to know that you have that support out there so that you can contact them and get the support that you need, instead of, calling the abuser or going back to the abuser or going to see the abuser. Because every time that you get in contact with the abuser, it could potentially be, unfortunately, your last time.
Also, and I want to touch on, because a lot of people don't understand, because what you said is true. I am a recovering alcoholic, and what you said is true. It is a lot like recovering from a substance. What a lot of people don't understand is when you contact the abuser, or when you maybe go back to them or try to establish contact with them, it raises your serotonin levels, which is the chemical imbalance in your brain. And that's the same thing that alcohol does for alcoholics, or that drugs do for drug addicts. So a huge part, because I've overcome alcoholism and domestic violence, is finding natural ways to raise your serotonin levels or your oxytocin levels in your brain. A lot of that is a support group, because as women have said in there, I look forward to this. It gets them excited. It is a natural, a natural high. Basically, but it's natural. And that's, something that they teach us when we're overcoming alcoholism. I know a lot of us had gotten into working out, because that is actually something that raises your dopamine levels naturally, without you introducing any chemicals to your body to increase your dopamine levels, to help you kind of balance out those cravings so that you're not craving it. And that always helps people kind of maybe grasp it a little better when they're like, well, how is domestic violence related to alcoholism? Well, that person, and the thing is, when I say they brainwash you, it's kind of like tactics that they use at war when they're trying to break down a prisoner and get information out of them, where they don't feed them and then give them bread. It's like, you're excited because they're giving you bread. This is you feel better. So when you see that person, or you hear a bell or something like that, you're going to get something, and you start to get excited. That is an actual thing. So this person has done that to you, and you have to recondition your mind and break that cycle. And it's difficult. And that's why because some people just can't grasp that it's like being addicted to a drug. Like, how? This is people, our government does this. Other people's governments do this. These abusers, these perpetrators are not stupid by a long shot. No. They are what they're doing is very strategic. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's
understand that it's an addiction, and you did bring up a good point, is that it's just like, they do try to break you down. It is brainwashing. The trauma bond is is similar that to the Stockholm syndrome. So it is a form of brainwashing, and it is a form of control. And so what happens is, like you said, you do have to recondition your brain. Once you go no contact, that's exactly what you're doing. You're rewiring and reconditioning your brain, so that slowly your brain can get used to being without that person. Just like an alcoholic is having to be without the drink. Now, it's not saying that alcoholic isn't going to have days where they want to take the drink. You're going to have days where you're trauma bonded and you want to speak to your abuser and you want to see your abuser and you want to, be with them. But it's reconditioning your brain. Okay, I'm having a tough day today. I feel like I want to talk to my abuser. Let me go take a walk. Let me go work out. Let me do some self-care. Let me, do some painting, watch a TV show, find something else to do. Journaling, that's another good one. So that you're not doing that.
And in the beginning, it feels forced, which is why a lot of survivors have issues sticking to it, because it feels forced, but you have to force yourself, and then eventually it just becomes second nature. Yeah, and then you don't have the cravings anymore.
Exactly. And it feels forced because like an alcoholic or a drug user, when they stop, that first couple days that they're stopped, they're going through withdrawal. And they become sick. They become, it becomes very difficult for them. So they're like, hey, I just want to go back to that drink. I just want to go back to those drugs. But with the trauma bond, you do go through withdrawal as well. It's not quite the same as the alcoholic and the drug user, but there are physical symptoms, and it does make you feel as sick, and it does make you feel as though you're not going to survive like without this person. So it becomes very difficult for that person, to the point where they're like, yeah, a lot of times they do end up going back, because I've dealt with survivors, particularly, there was a survivor I was helping, and it had only been, I want to say, it had only been like 9 hours that she had gone without speaking to him, because she was trying to go no contact. And in 9 hours, it was difficult for her to even to go the 9 hours. She had kept saying to me, like, I just need to call. I just need to text. I just need to call. I just need to text. And it was only 9 hours. So it again, this was her first day trying the no contact. And it took a while before she got to that point where she was completely no contact.
Yeah, and I just want to encourage someone or anyone who might be on here, and you might be in that space where you're in between, and you're being abused, you're trying to get away from your abuser, you're already away from the abuser, but you still have the desire to connect with them. I just want to encourage you that if you've contacted them, even though you committed to non-contacting them, and you've fallen off the wagon, it's okay to start all over again. Like, there's never a time where you can't start all over again. Don't beat yourself up. It's okay. Trust me, I think we might have all, I know I've fallen off the wagon many a times, but I got back up. So I just want to encourage you, if you committed to yourself that you wouldn't contact, but you did, and now you might be stuck in a situation, it's never too late to stop. So we just want to encourage you, because our goal is to ensure that you're safe, you're healthy, and you're whole. And that's what we want to support. So it's okay if you fell off the wagon. We're here to help you get you back on. Like Theresa said, we mentor, and I have many mentors where they go back and forth. And it's okay, because I'm here to hold your hand wherever you are and whatever decisions you make. I'm here to support you. But my goal is to make sure that you're safe. More than anything is to make sure that you're safe. And that's what we want to encourage you to say. Don't feel bad if we're talking about this and you might feel like, oh man, I fell off the wagon. It's okay. Get back up. We are here to help you. We're here to hold your hand, and there's so much support. Don't be afraid or ashamed to reach out for help, because we are intimate. We are a safe place. We are here to help you, and we are, I want to say, confidential, so you don't have to worry about your information being shared. So if you need help, seek out help. We are here to help you and hold your hand through the process.
Definitely. And yes, I could have said that any better. And that is true, because like alcoholics or drug users, they have times where they relapse and then they start back over with their sobriety, and the trauma bond is no different. If you've fallen off the wagon, it has happened to all of us, pretty much all of us as survivors, and it's okay. It does not mean that you can start again and go no contact. So we're definitely not here to judge, and we're definitely here to help mentor and coach you and help guide you and hold your hand. So it is okay if you have fallen off the wagon. You can go back no contact again. And actually, there is an app. I used it when I started going no contact. It's called Day Count. And it's a free app. You can use it in your, download it in your smartphone, and it'll literally count the days that you went no contact. And I know some people are like, well, why is that important? Because once you start to see, now obviously when you go day one, okay, you won't see as much. But once you're like, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, you'll be like, wow, it'll show you that you've went 3-4 weeks within. And then before you know it, it's a month, 2 months, 3 months. And before you know it, you looked up and it's 365 days. You've been no contact a year. So I encourage you to use that app. It's a free app, and it will remind you. It's a little, helpful reminder of what it is that you're doing.
And a way to celebrate your success, because we all know that coming out of abuse, that is a triumph. And every day that you're out of abuse, that's a victory. So we want you to celebrate you, and we want to celebrate you too. So
yes, absolutely. Celebrate. Even, you've gone a day, or you've gone a couple hours.
Hour. Every hour matters. And remember, every hour that you're out of the relationship is an opportunity that you saved your life, you saved your family, your children. So it's something worth celebrating.
Absolutely. And you guys did touch on most of the red flags, and I want to just touch on a couple more for those that are out there that are listening. And if you want to, some of you that may be grabbing your notepad, some other red flags are obviously embarrassing or putting you down, which is one of the ones that they already touched on. Looking at you or acting in ways that scare you. That's a huge one. So like they're looking at you intimidatingly, or yelling at you, or throwing something across the room. Although they haven't physically touched you, they're intimidating you. So it is a form of abuse. Controlling who you see, where you go, what you do, who you talk on the phone with, going through your phone. I have experienced that as well. Keeping you or discouraging you from seeing your friends or your family, isolating you. Also trying to keep you in a room, like you're in the bedroom and they're telling you that you can't leave the bedroom. That is also abusive. Taking your money or refusing to give you money for expenses. So this talks about the financial aspect of abuse, which is not very often talked about. So I love to talk about this because I experienced this as well. So for financial abuse, it could be that the abuser is the breadwinner, and so they're making you ask for all the money, and they're giving you an allowance, and or maybe they're not giving you any money, and you have money for your needs and things like that, and they're controlling all the finances and you can't get anything. That's one aspect of it. Another aspect, it could be that, like I was saying in the beginning, taking your money. So you could be working full time or working period, and the abuser is taking your paycheck, or demanding that you give some of your paycheck to pay certain expenses that they want to pay. So that is also a form of financial abuse. Preventing
also,
you from
like taking, like also using your card, using like you having access to your credit cards, your debit cards, and using them without your authorization. Also applying for things and using your credit, and ruining your credit score is another form of financial abuse. So those are just a few more that I can think of because I've experienced some of those myself. But yeah, so myself it happens. Too. It's and economic or financial abuse, whichever we want to call it, is so broad, and people don't realize that they're in relationships and they're being financially abused and don't even know it. Like they're, men or women are taking their credit cards and using them without their authorization. That's a form of abuse. So things like that. So we don't talk about it, like Theresa said, often, but it is something to consider if you're in a situation like that, to look at it a little bit deeper and see if that could be your situation.
Yes. And also too that we're talking about financial abuse, all of the things you mentioned are definitely examples, especially that using your card without your authorization, that happens a lot more times than people realize. The other thing with financial abuse can also be that they're preventing you from going to work. So you have a job and they're trying to stop you from getting to that job. Either they're taking the car so you can't get to the job, or maybe they're turning off the alarm clock so that you'll wake up late so that you'll miss the job, or coming to your job and creating a scene in hopes that you'll get fired. So those are also forms of financial abuse because they're trying to prevent you from having that job. The other thing is, so preventing you from making your own decisions. So that's another form of abuse, telling you that you're a bad parent. A lot of times that happens in abusive relationships, or they're criticizing your parenting to make you feel bad as a parent, making you second guess yourself as a parent, threatening to harm or take away your children, saying that they'll do something to the children if you try to leave, preventing you from working or attending school. That's another huge one too, is a lot of times abuse victims are going to college and they'll try to prevent you from getting your degree, things like that. Blaming you for the abuse or acting like the abuse is not really happening, which is a form of gaslighting, which is another abuse tactic. Destroying your property or threatening to hurt or kill your pets. Intimidating you with guns, knives, or other weapons. Shoving, slapping, choking, hitting, or hitting you, attempting to stop you from pressing charges, and threatening to commit suicide because of something you've done, threatening to hurt or kill you, and pressuring you to have sex when you don't want to. So that again, that ties into the sexual abuse. And also that ties into the sexual abuse is trying to do things that you're not sexually comfortable with, like trying to do things in the bedroom that you've said that you're not comfortable with and you don't want to do this, or forcing you to continue because at any time you can say no and they're still trying to continue. That's also a form of sexual abuse. Pressuring you to use drugs or alcohol, preventing you from using birth control or pressuring you to become pregnant, or also pressuring you to terminate a pregnancy. That's reproductive abuse, which is not talked about often as well. And then, of course, there's spiritual aspects of abuse where they're using the Bible and their interpretation of the Bible to get you to do certain things as well. So those are, it's not an all-encompassing list, but those are quite a bit of red flags that you should be looking at. And if you see those in your relationship, definitely you want to reach out to domestic violence agencies, NDV Healing Support Incorporated or Live Fearless Inc., either myself or Yolanda, organization, and we can definitely help you with safety, exit plans, and mentoring and coaching, because definitely if you are experiencing any of those are definitely red flags. And so I think I didn't want to get too much onto the trauma bonding and the love bombing and trauma bonding, although we did talk about it a little bit. I did want to define it just so that the audience knows what it may be, but I didn't want to talk about too much because our next live on Wednesday, the 14th of October, we will actually be reviewing love bombing and trauma bonding, which trauma bonding is a huge topic. We talk about that in our empowerment series. We talk about it on the podcast. We've talked about it in lives in the group. Like we talk about trauma bonding constantly because it is one of the major reasons why a victim stays. So, and a lot of people don't understand that addiction. So trauma bonding is something that we will continuously bring up so that people can really understand that. So Yolanda, Nikki, is there anything else that you guys wanted to add?
The only thing that I wanted to add is we talked about the different types of abuse and some of the warning signs. So I always encourage people, if you're in a relationship and if any of these things, these topics that we referred to or the characteristics sound familiar and you're going through a situation like that, it is a time for you to consider what your relationship is. If it's an abusive relationship, is it an unhealthy relationship that could be worked on, or is it a healthy relationship? I always like to use the relationship spectrum, which is, you can find it online. That is a good tool to use it gives you basically characteristics of a healthy relationship, an unhealthy relationship, and an abusive relationship. So if you feel like anything that we've said causes you any pain or it stirs your soul, like this might be your situation, that could be a tool that you can use to kind of measure where you are in your relationship. And then if that is the case, we want to encourage you to reach out for support, or at least start to deal with it within yourself and figure out where you are, and then work on steps to either determine if your relationship is a relationship that you want to be in and try to work into a relationship with your partner, or if it's something that it's that drastic that you need to get out. But we really want you to have the access to the tools so that you know for yourself what type of relationship that you're in and if it's healthy or unhealthy or abusive. So again, it's the relationship spectrum. You go right to Google, you'll find it. It's in 3 columns. It has healthy relationship, abusive relationship, and unhealthy, and know where you are in the spectrum. And it's good to know, because when you start to see signs to flare up, then that's a sign for you to start communicating with your partner to say, hey, where are we here? You know, if there's concern, so that if you're looking to build a healthy relationship, it really starts with knowing what that is and making sure that the two of you are grounded in what that is and working together to keep it. Or if you feel you're in abuse, you probably are, and that's a time where you need to start planning to get out. If you're currently in a situation of abuse in a household where you're with an abusive relationship, there's access to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Reach out for support if you need to get out right away. Also, we can help you with safety planning. Make sure that you communicate with your friends and family, somebody that you trust. Set up a code word for text messaging if there's an emergency. Always make sure you have your cell phone with you, and create a place for safety if you have children, so they can go if there's an abusive event that happens or incident within the house. Create a place where they know where to go if something starts to stir up. Those are just a couple of signs. But again, we are also, you can find me at Live Fearless Inc. You have NDV Healing and Support. You have Nikki, you can find her. Nikki, what's your group? Because they're awesome.
Survivors Overcoming Abusive Partners.
Yeah, we are here to help you. So wherever you are in your journey, reach out, and we're here to help you walk through it. So just reach out for support. Sometimes it's just a phone call. You know, you just want to talk about where you are. It'd be okay to just have the phone call. Doesn't mean you have to leave tomorrow. You might not be ready to leave yet, and that's okay too. But sometimes it just starts with the phone call, and the courage comes with the phone call, and we know that. So we thank you in advance for trusting us or allowing us the opportunity to serve you.
Yes, because we have received quite a bit of calls, especially for our mentoring and coaching. And yes, we would want to thank you guys for trusting us to serve you. And she's right. You know, it starts with that phone call, and sometimes you just need that phone call. And we are here, you know, whenever you are ready to make that phone call, we are definitely here to support you no matter where you are in your journey. Do not think that you have to be at that point where you have already left yet. You could be at that point where you are still planning to leave, and that's okay. We can do a safety exit plan. So just, you know, if you just want to make that phone call, we are definitely here for you. And so
one thing
go ahead.
You want to make sure that and it's good to reach out to someone else who's an objective person, because they can give you insight. They can either take away all the black and white because they don't know the entire situation. So it's always good, like I said, to reach out, and if it's just a phone call from an objective party who can hear you without judgment, and also can help filter out exactly what's going on based off your situation. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nikki. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, no, I didn't have anything to say.
Oh, okay. So yes, thank you guys. We just want to thank all of you for joining us. This has been our Live Wednesdays, Domestic Violence 101 and Narcissist Abuse 101, where we bring you the education on domestic violence and narcissist abuse. So we will have different topics each time. And so please join us next Wednesday, October 14th. These lovely ladies will be back again, and we will be discussing trauma bonding and love bombing, which, like I said, I could go on talking about trauma bonding all day. So that's one of my most passionate topics. So definitely please join us for that, because that will be really awesome, you know, great educational pieces. So again, we want to thank you for joining us in our live Wednesday Domestic Violence 101. Thank you to Yolanda, and thank you to Nikki. And we will see you guys here again, same place, next Wednesday. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.